You are. Thank you, everyone. I have never heard a budget address that didn't even mention the budget before. That budget comments were anything but affordable. This upcoming budget is anything but affordable. We need to strip it down to the studs and rebuild with responsible spending. And that's what we intend to do during the budget season. They're deflecting blame on the federal government that haven't even happened yet. And meanwhile, they're spending money we don't have and relying on revenues that won't materialize. State and local taxes have gone up by $30 billion over Governor Murphy's tenure, and we still have an unmanageable budget deficit. So how is New Jersey fairer and stronger? How can people who depend on state services survive when the state is increasingly more unaffordable? We will do a deep dive into this budget over the next couple of months, and we will make sure that we do everything we can to make this more affordable for the people of New Jersey. I'd like to turn it over to Senator Bucco, the minority leader. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. So 8 years ago, Governor Murphy campaigned on raising taxes and increasing spending in the state of New Jersey. Remember, if taxes are your issue, New Jersey is probably not your state. Well, listen, he certainly delivered on his promises. But he said these policies would make New Jersey stronger and fairer. Today, we see the results of those policies. Standing on the edge of a fiscal cliff, I ask you, stronger and fairer for who? As you heard, taxes and spending policies around the state have made New Jersey more unaffordable. In fact, the cost of living has raised more than $30,000 during the Murphy administration. Whether it's an increase in the cost of eggs or electricity, the increase in tolls, transit, or gas prices, they can't raise the money fast enough to keep up with the spending. And the governor said it today, going to have another structural deficit. Now, we can debate on whether that's $1 billion structural deficit or anywhere up to $4 billion for the next administration. But the fact of the matter is, we continue here in the state to spend more than we take in. And the Republican Party, my colleagues on both sides of me, the leadership in both houses on the Republican side, have said it for years. Eventually, this state was going to hit the fiscal cliff. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for COVID, we would have been here sooner. But this governor has been able to use those funds over the last few years to spend more and more and more. Unfortunately, spending the money the way it has been spent is a missed opportunity. Many of the problems that the governor spoke about today could have been fixed if we had utilized that money in a different fashion. If we fixed the school funding formula. If we made some reforms that many of us have advocated for. We could have put ourselves in a much better position. But we haven't. And that's unfortunate. Because where we are today was predictable and preventable. And while the governor paints a rosy picture, as the budget officer said, you know, this was more of a State of the State address than a budget address. While he paints a rosy picture, and he does a good job at it, I'll give him credit for that. He does a good job at it. The fact of the matter is, when we start digging into this budget, you will see that they are increasing taxes again. Fees will continue to go up. The economy, despite what the governor said, is not getting any better. And we still have the highest property taxes in the nation. More people in New Jersey are living paycheck to paycheck. And in my home county, Morris County, which is considered a pretty wealthy county, we've had a 43% increase in homelessness. Stronger and fairer for who? And I can tell you, when you start asking people on the streets whether they think these policies have produced a stronger and fairer New Jersey for them, I think for the most part you will find the answer to that is no. So you can listen to that rosy picture that the governor just painted. But as we get into this budget cycle and we start digging in to what this budget is going to become, I say you buyer beware. Because you will see how it is going to become more and more expensive for the people in New Jersey, and the agencies that need the money the most will be asked to do more with less. And that's unfortunate, but that is where we're at today. Now I'd like to turn it over to our Senate Budget Officer, Senator O'Scanlan, to talk a little bit deeper into the budget as he's evaluated it.
Thank you, Leader. Appreciate it. Hey, guys. Nice to see you. I want to start by saying something nice about Governor Murphy. He is a man of good humor, and we've come to be able to disagree without dislike. Case in point, I don't know if you saw it, on the floor, he handed me this lipstick. Now, you recall last week, I think I might have said something like this budget address would probably be him slathering gallons of lipstick on a budget pig, and he got the joke, and I appreciate that. I genuinely like the governor, and I think it's mutual, even though I've been known to piss him off occasionally. So, look, this budget is that pig, I do have to say. And it's a way, it was designed for years to permit this administration to kind of glide out and dump the problems of New Jersey onto the next governor. Republicans have predicted this for years, and it is a problem. The structural deficit that the leader mentioned and the Assembly Budget Officer mentioned is going to end up, when all is said and done, between $3 and $4 billion for this next governor that's coming in. And that is a tremendous problem, and it's a tragedy. This administration will go down as the administration of missed opportunities. We could have used the breathing room that the federal largesse, between 15 and 20 billion of it, to fix our budget, to right our ship, to do the reforms necessary to make New Jersey sustainable for the long term, to do the things the governor is suggesting he did today without any facts behind them. New Jerseyans are not feeling more secure in their fiscal future today than they were 7 years ago. And he himself said, with this budget, he's starting to get us on a path towards solvency and towards a balanced budget. He admitted it. It is not. Look, you're better off having a $5 billion surplus and a balanced budget than a $10 billion surplus and a $3 to $4 billion structural deficit. That money goes away very quickly. With the slightest economic hiccup, New Jersey's going to be a disaster again. And we all, well, not all of us, but I'm old enough to remember 2008, 2009, when we dug the hole deep, when we shouldn't have, in good times, and we had hit more than a fiscal hiccup, and things fell apart. It was a disaster. We came this close to closing schools, to not being able to fund the operations of New Jersey. We are in jeopardy of that, I fear, over the next few years under this next administration. There are many, many increases in taxes here on car trade-ins, on digital services, dramatic increases in real estate transfers for housing worth more than $1 million, which is most houses that sell in New Jersey these days, doubling or more those hits. This is a problem, given where we should be. We should be rolling in dough. We should be having an absolute structurally balanced deficit, and we are not doing either of those things. It's a serious problem, one that will, again, be dumped into the lap of the next governor. I wish there were better news today, and again, I genuinely like the governor, but It's tragic, these missed opportunities. One last thing, the dramatic missed opportunity of reworking our school funding formula. The governor mentioned today that every student was going to benefit from the increased funding in schools, and every taxpayer, he suggested, was benefiting from the massive increase in school funding, close to $4 billion as of this budget. Yet, only a handful of school districts benefited. Half of our school districts, aid didn't keep up with inflation, and at least half of them had cuts. These are districts that are facing crisis, that are facing bankruptcy, that are eliminating extracurricular activities, eliminating sports, dramatically increasing class sizes. These are school board members coming to me saying, we may have to shut off the lights. We have no idea how we're going to survive other than dismantling the quality education for our kids. So he is completely either misrepresenting or misunderstanding his own record there. And had we gone back and reworked the school funding formula, we could have eliminated those cuts, given a whole lot more to the districts that deserved it, and still cut $1 billion, $1.5 billion of this structural deficit, maybe cut it in half. Again, just one example of the tragic missed opportunities of this administration. Thank you all for being here. I'm going to turn this over now to the Assembly Leader.
Thank you, Budget Officer. Well, I feel like we are in the same room, same story, different year. I've been hearing for months there was going to be cuts in this budget, 5% across the board. Where are they? I don't see cuts. The budget is up $1.4, $1.5 billion as compared to the adopted version of the budget last year in its initial form. Somewhere buried in the budget in brief is a $1.6 billion federal line item of revenue from federal funds.
Page 103.
Federal? Okay, thank you, Declan, for the page number. But the point is, he's anticipating $1.6 billion of federal funds while he's crying about what may or may not happen in the future in Washington. How's he doing that? How's he justifying putting a revenue line in there that he doesn't even know if it exists? And I just want to go back to taxing trade-ins. So an average Joe in New Jersey buys a car for 20 grand. A few years later, he sells it for 10 or 12,000. That $12,000 value would normally not be taxed on the new car. He's going to get hit with another $600 or $700 bill on something he already paid tax on previously. That is so insensitive to the middle class in New Jersey. It's ridiculous. Let's talk about them numbers. When he started, the budget was $34.5 billion. It's now $58 billion in 8 years, the proposed budget. That's 68% in 8 years. $23.5 billion more in spending. Yet schools remained underfunded all across the state, where teachers have been laid off. Students are suffering for lack of the ability to have what they need in their schools. There wasn't a way to find a way to balance those things better, and once and for all fix that school funding formula. That's not fair to kids, not fair to anyone. The surplus is less than 11% of spending. It would only last about 39 days. 39 days. State of New Jersey can't even get off the ground under the current amount of surplus that's anticipated in this budget. All I can say is, God knows what's going to happen in June when all the SUVs of the leadership of the other side of the aisle hits the governor's office and they start negotiating pork. And I got an idea. Maybe they could go back and cut $700 million out of the budget of what's previously been put in there for pork and give it back to the taxpayers in Jersey and stop overburdening us. The point is, this is unsustainable. We've said it's been unsustainable. It's going to go off a cliff. He's limping across the finish line, and then we're going to have a more difficult time, as it will be next year and going forward, unless something really good happens. So there's a lot of things to question here. We intend to question these things throughout the budget process at the committee level. If they want us to offer up cuts, we'll find them, and we'll offer them up. So with that, step back. We have questions?
So let's start here. I'm going to refrain a line from the governor's speech. Where would you guys cut?
Pork. Let me just, if I can, sorry. What a lame line. He himself knows that every year of his governorship, Republicans have put detailed propositions, and most of you have received them in the press, Look, it's easy to go after, I don't know, several $100 million of pork for a sports stadium in Middlesex. I can give you dozens of line items, and I can give you our web address that has hundreds of millions of dollars of cuts. The school funding formula alone, you easily could go in and probably find, had you done it over the past several years, as Republicans recommended, over $1 billion, rather than increase spending by $4 billion, increase by $3 billion, which is huge but not obscene, and done it better. Saved $1 billion. $1 billion in one category off our structural deficit. So we've had hundreds of small line items, dozens of larger line items. I throw it back at the governor. And again, it's on paper. What we've put. I really resent that suggestion. Republicans have presented comprehensive alternatives every single year, and they were ignored.
Yeah, I mean, for example, just last year when we negotiated the Transportation Trust Fund, the refunding the Transportation Trust Fund, the Republicans, myself, and Senator Tiver put up a bill that would have extended the funding for the Transportation Trust Fund to 8 years. The Democrats' proposal was for 5 years. Our proposal would have brought the Transportation Trust Fund out to 8 years without an increase in the gas tax. It was laid out in legislation. The Democrats decided that they were going to put their bill through. They raised the gas tax, and the Transportation Trust Fund was only extended for 5 years. So right there, you would have had 8 years without an increase in the gas tax had they come to the table and negotiated with us over fixing that problem. You know, the problem is here, we have spent now 20 plus years, right? 20 plus years. Well, no, excuse me. We've had 20 plus years of the legislature controlled by the Democrats. The last 8 years of one-party rule. And when you have one-party rule, this is what the public loses. It loses transparency, and it loses the negotiations. Because unless you have a Republican governor or a Republican legislature, there's no need for the Democrats to negotiate with the Republicans. When I took office, when I took over as a Senate Republican leader, I said, give us a seat at the table. Give us a seat at the table to negotiate some of this stuff. Believe it or not, we have some pretty good ideas. Our Senate Budget Officer already spoke about the pages and pages of suggestions over the last few budget cycles of reductions that could have been made. I gave you the gas tax bill. Go back and look it up. It's there. If we would have had a Republican governor or we would have had a Republican legislature, there would have had to been some negotiations. And the people in New Jersey would have been better off for it.
So just so I understand, to talk about this year, one thing the Republicans would like the Democratic Party would like to look at a little bit closer is the school funding formula and possibly find $1 billion in savings there.
Well, no, not necessarily, because the S2 is, and we don't want to get too far in the weeds, because the school funding formula horrifically was fully funded, it gets very hard to claw that back. You probably could find a few $100 million. We're not going to get the $1.5 billion that was there. That is a squandered opportunity because you're just not going to be able to claw it back. We have to be realistic about that. But again, we have to dive into this budget. We will have hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts easily. We just have to see what's back in the budget, and we only have a budget in brief, so there's not a lot of specifics yet. This administration started the practice of building in their own pork right out of the gate. That hasn't happened before. This administration instituted that. Dozens of line items, hundreds of millions of dollars in pork built into the budget the governor puts out. We bet that's in there. We just don't know what it is yet. Governor Christie was notorious for pulling out everything and having bare budgets that he introduced. And so was all the way back to Florio. Before that, this administration has introduced their own level of pork in addition to legislative added pork. We're going to go after all of that.
Did you hear anything today that you were like, pork alert, like anything particular?
Look, the funding of preschool it's a slap in the face to all the school districts, this administration. Before you put money into preschool, and you could argue, you could debate the value of preschool, it's nice and convenient for parents, but while you're starving hundreds of school districts that are having to double class sizes or end extracurricular activities, that's certainly a misguided priority, if not more.
If I could add to that, we've been talking about that for years. Remember the state of the state 6 weeks ago? Remember he said that some schools didn't have full-day kindergarten yet? So talk about putting the cart before the horse. We've been talking forever about this. We should properly fund the K-12s first. Get them where they belong before you ever add new stuff. And we don't even have full-day kindergarten in some schools, like Hillsborough, for God's sakes. Pretty wealthy community in Somerset County. So it's a matter of what sounds good and messaging and buying votes the way they buy votes. But the point is, it's not an effective way to carry it out a plan if you're not meeting your prime mission first and then add to it from there as you have more money to add to it.
And the governor's proposal to hold the cuts to 3% and the increases to 6% for school districts across the state is too little too late. I mean, we've got school districts that have been cut millions and millions of dollars. So they're going to hold them. Now they want to hold them to 3%? I mean, so, you know, it sounds good on paper. It sounds good from the podium. But in reality, when you look at what's happened and where we are today, it's a disaster.
The Murphy administration said it's concerned about federal dollars potentially being disrupted, including up to $5 billion with Medicaid funds. Do you share those concerns?
Let's be clear. We do not want Medicaid or Medicare funding slashed. However, I think right now these are scare tactics because we don't know what those numbers will be. And we certainly will wait to see. But we are not looking for Medicaid or Medicare slash funding. But, you know, again, to scare the public that this is going to happen, let's wait and see what's negotiated down in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, I mean, and the governor, like was stated before, governor put $1.6 billion of additional federal funding in this budget. If he was that concerned about losing money, why would he estimate an additional $1.6 billion in this budget? Makes no sense, right? I don't want to talk about what hypothetically could happen. We're aware of the negotiations. We need to be prepared to react if we have to, but we're not going to start making decisions based on hypothetical things that are being stated and said. You know, we have to deal with reality. And the fact that the governor put $1.6 billion additional money into this governor, anticipated an additional $1.6 billion in federal funding, tells me he's not so concerned.
What will your reaction be, though, if there are these widespread cuts coming from Washington? Is that something to be concerned of, or is that something the state should be better prepared for?
Well, if we weren't going in with a $3 to $4 billion structural deficit, we'd be much better situated to deal with any cuts from D.C. And by the way, they should have been anticipating some restructuring of the federal budget because everybody knows it's a mess as well. And something that can't go on forever will end. Well, you look at if you're paying any attention to what's going on at the federal level for the past 20 years, you know that there's going to be changes made. We will support responsible cuts. We will support responsible restructuring and doing things more efficiently. We will vociferously, whether it's coming from Donald Trump or a Democrat, vociferously oppose irresponsible cuts. We're on record saying that, I think. But to hypothetically suggest there's going to be multi-billion cuts, I think that's a premature discussion. Sorry, guys.
Can you give some examples of what irresponsible cuts could look like?
If you take a cleaver to Medicaid, you will really do serious damage to our ability to deliver basic health care to people in New Jersey. Charity care is the program that exists still and has existed for a long time. And we, with the federal government's help, transition a lot of people away from charity care, which costs New Jersey much more than Medicaid delivery. That would be a serious problem. Now, again, we'll have to take a look. But if you take a cleaver rather than a scalpel, that's going to be a problem, and you're going to hear both Democrats and Republicans talk about that. And I think that'll be true at the federal level as well. There are responsible Republicans in the Senate and the House who are already saying, whoa, you can't really take a cleaver to that program.
So you're
I think they will work very hard to do that, yes. Their voices will be heard. We have the Republican portion of the New Jersey delegation are a great group of guys, so I think that we'll be in good hands.
What's your reaction to the proposed OBGYN program to bring in new healthcare workers to the state? Is that something New Jersey needs?
Well, I would, as the nurse in the room, we definitely need it, but the question is, how are you going to make that happen? You know, I listened to that and I said, well, that sounds great, but we only have so many slots, number one, for residency programs, and that's the way the medical system is set up. And it's very difficult to attract people into OBGYN residencies because of the malpractice environment in the country, but particularly in the state. So I support the efforts, but I want to see if it actually happens. We have seen across this state already that we have difficulty filling these slots, and that's what it's called in medicine, is slots. We have difficulty filling the slots at Rutgers because we don't pay our residents enough money. So we compound a group of residents who aren't paid enough. The residents at Rutgers are paid less than any other group of residents across this region, including Health and Hospitals Corporation, which is not known for having robust salaries for residents. So we have unfilled slots already here in New Jersey. So I commend them for attempting it, but I like to see how they make it happen based on two things, the salaries and also the medical malpractice, which, as we all know, those numbers are out of touch. And that's the reason people are leaving obstetrics and going into gynecology, those who are already in it. So, you know, kudos for the attempt. Let's see if it happens.
Yeah, the devil will be in the
Details, right. Again, you know, you have to look at the reality of how they fill the slots in medical training, and that's what we're talking about.
Stan, Jay, what's your thoughts on how they're planning to implement this? And I know there's been a lot of skepticism from your side. Confidence in its future beyond this first tranche.
That's gonna add to the structural deficit next year, right? Another $1 billion is gonna have to be added to that program next year. And the fact of the matter is, if it goes forward, the legislation's gonna have to be changed, because the surplus amount that's projected doesn't meet the statutory criteria for the program to exist. So I have to tell you, this next governor is gonna be left with an enormous hole to fill. And you know what they say, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Well, this governor keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper, and it's gonna be that much harder for the next governor to be able to move that program forward.
If I just say this about it, it's been a great messaging tool for the Democrats. We'll see if it really happens.
Let me say, though, that just because it's going to add to the structural deficit doesn't mean it should be the first thing not implemented or cut. I think Republicans, given our druthers, would say, absolutely, that should be one of the things that we should implement first and look for cuts in other parts of the budget to fund it. It is a very expensive program. And our problem with it isn't that we don't back property tax relief. We absolutely do. The problem is the Democrats are promising it and putting up no way to pay for it. Or what else are you going to cut to pay for it? That's responsible budgeting. Right now, it's fantasy. Republicans, again, if we happen to take some control, would probably protect that program and make cuts other places. My fear is with Democrats, the first place they'll cut after this next election is going to be things like tax relief and their own program in stay in jail.
The budget in brief said that they plan to cut 10% in college tuition aid. Is that the type of cut that you think is responsible and that you hope to see more of in terms of?
Well, we've got to dig in, right, to see. And again, I haven't had a lot of time with it. I happen to remember one page of one thing. So
That's pretty good.
Pretty impressive. No, actually, staff gets credit for that. Tom Neff gets credit for that, and a shout out. We have to look and see what they're doing. On its face, that doesn't seem like a wise place to be cutting. Our students here face exorbitant costs across the board. They have to live, they have to find places to live, and they have to pay tuition. We're going to look and see. We're not ready to come out in favor or opposition of any cuts. But a lot of these things right now are probably performative. So that they could say they tried to cut or they had cuts on the table and the legislature put things back in. I don't recall, are county colleges getting cut too? Do we know yet? We may not.
It says they're being cut, but it's not really a cut. It's just money being shifted to a different
Okay, so we got to look at the details before we can.
But what that shows is, though, right, that when you talk about stronger and fairer, certainly if those cuts go through, our middle-class, hard-working families are not, it's not going to be stronger and fairer for them, for their kids, to be able to put them and give them a great college education. It's going to be harder. And like I said before, you know, stronger and fairer for who? When you start looking at all these programs that are going to lose funding.
Question, how did you guys all vote on the legislators' salary hikes? Because that came up, yeah, okay. Because that came up as, you know, that's a massive expense.
We all voted no.
I did not. I voted yes.
Oh, you did?
So
Okay.
there's
I,
no
well, I
disagreement here.
don't mean to speak for.
It's all right.
And as
Yeah.
usual, I'm right now. I'm just, there's plenty of room for debate on that. We hadn't given salary increases to legislators in a long time, and staff as well. We're blessed. I don't want to say this too loudly because they're here and they're all going to ask for raises once I say this. We're blessed with really great staff on both sides of the aisle. And these kids, most of you are, except Neff, he's old. They come here, and we hope that they stay longer than they really should because they go out in the private sector. So that was part of it. But also, you want people, you want non-rich people to be able to take these positions who have the perspective of struggling. And if you're not paying a reasonable salary, they can't do it. So that was my reasoning. There are counter arguments about voting for salary increases that are fair, but that's where we are, and that's why.
I have one more question, and that was about the taxes and fees, that there seems to be a couple new ones, some expanded ones that are in this budget. Some of them are kind of interesting. One was on firearms, and you know, all the firearm stuff is still under litigation. One was on drones, which, you know, if you believe everyone, there's a million. That could be a big money
Might be able to balance the budget on the drones.
Right, exactly. So any thoughts specifically about any of the new fees that he mentioned?
Any new tax is a drag on the economy.
Yeah.
It's money out of hardworking people's pockets that they could be using for other things.
We just haven't had a ton of time with the specifics.
Right.
yet.
I
It's
think
been
you
kind of
had more time to
whirlwind,
take a
yeah.
look at it than we've had.
Much more, but
But-
Yes, right, agreed.
But again, like every other year, when the governor claims we're not really raising taxes or fees or tolls, it's massive increases that have happened over the past his tenure. I mean, it's huge. It's billions of dollars. So again, no new taxes and the greatest tax relief. Give me a break. He's including school funding and tax relief, which is sort of, if he's going to suggest that additional school funding is tax relief and property tax relief, he's got to take credit for increasing property taxes in half the residences in New Jersey because he's cut to school districts or hasn't kept up with inflation in half those districts. So that's our bottom line on his claims about taxes. Anybody else?
Good?
All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you.
I do wish he had mixed up the chapstick he put on in the middle with this. It would have been hilarious.
Yeah.
Now,
So do I ever
I'm pretty sure it's red.
It's as red as you can
Oh,
get.
it is.
Try it on, Deck.
Okay, hold on.
No.